From a luxury brand that made something too ugly to survive, to a manufacturer whose truck the market rejected almost immediately, American truck makers have produced some of the ugliest pickups ever made. Number 9 had a truck bed so small it was practically decorative. Number 6 was a pickup built on a car chassis, and it showed. Whatever you think is the ugliest truck ever built, number 1 is worse. These are the 10 ugliest pickup trucks ever built. Number 10, the Chevrolet Avalanche TE. In 2002, General Motors introduced a pickup truck that came wrapped in plastic body cladding from the door sills all the way down to the rocker panels. The Avalanche looked like someone had bolted a truck cab onto a plastic bath toy and called it a day. The exterior panels were a two-tone mess of gray cladding against whatever body color you ordered, and the proportions never quite worked from any angle. The bed featured a system called the midgate, which allowed the rear wall of the cab to fold down and extend cargo space into the back seat. It was genuinely clever engineering buried inside one of the most visually confused trucks Detroit ever produced. Sales were actually solid in those early years, which tells you something about how much American truck buyers will forgive when the price is right. But General Motors eventually dropped the plastic cladding in 2007, quietly admitting through a product update what the market had been saying all along. The Avalanche without cladding was a decent truck. The Avalanche with it looked like a prototype that escaped the design studio before anyone could stop it. Number 9, the Hummer H2 SUT. General Motors looked at the Hummer H2, a vehicle already the size of a small apartment building, and decided what it really needed was a pickup bed attached to the back. The result was the H2 SUT, which stood for Sport Utility Truck, a name that raised more questions than it answered. The bed measured just under 5 feet long, which sounds reasonable until you remember this thing was over 18 feet from bumper to bumper. The ratio of vehicle to usable cargo space was genuinely embarrassing. You were driving something that weighed 8,000 pounds and guzzled fuel like a military contract depended on it, and the reward for all that was a bed barely large enough to hold a sheet of plywood if you left the tailgate down. The H2 SUT did feature a midgate panel like the Avalanche, which at least gave you some flexibility, but the styling was the real problem. The H2 was already polarizing. The SUT added a trunk-style bed that looked grafted on as an afterthought because it essentially was. General Motors sold it from 2005 to 2009. Nobody has missed it since. Number 8, the Lincoln Mark LT. Ford had a problem in the mid-2000s. The F-150 was selling in enormous numbers, but the luxury truck segment felt underserved. Their answer was the Lincoln Mark LT, a truck that took a regular F-150 and dressed it up in a tuxedo that did not quite fit. The chrome grille was enormous, the kind of chrome that looks fine on a luxury sedan and looks like something melted on the front of a pickup. The interior was genuinely well appointed with real leather and proper Lincoln finishes throughout, but the exterior never found a coherent visual language between work truck and luxury vehicle, and the result read as neither. The Mark LT had power and capability. The 5.4-liter engine was more than adequate, and the towing numbers were competitive. But truck buyers who wanted a luxury experience were buying Cadillac Escalades, and truck buyers who wanted an F-150 were buying an F-150. The Mark LT found itself without a clear audience, and Ford discontinued it after the 2008 model year, 2 years on the American market. It was a truck that looked confused about what it wanted to be, and buyers felt the same way. Number 7. The Ford Explorer Sport Trac. Ford built the Explorer Sport Trac for 10 years, from 2001 to 2010, and in that time it never quite convinced anyone it was a real truck. The bed was just under 4 feet long on the first generation, which is a bed length that works well if you are transporting a very small amount of cargo or perhaps a single optimistic suitcase. The Sport Trac was built on the Explorer SUV platform rather than a truck platform, which meant it drove more like a car than a pickup, but hauled less than either. The styling reflected this identity crisis. The front was pure Explorer, smooth and rounded in the way Ford SUVs of that era looked. And then, somewhere behind the rear doors, it became a truck bed that clearly wished it were a proper tailgate. Some people loved the Sport Trac for exactly what it was, a comfortable daily driver with a little extra cargo flexibility. And to be fair, the four-wheel drive system worked well and the ride quality was genuinely comfortable. But it remains one of those vehicles that proved you cannot fully satisfy two different audiences by splitting the difference between them. Number 6. The Dodge Rampage. In 1982, Chrysler looked at its compact Omni hatchback, a front-wheel drive economy car, and decided it should also be a pickup truck. The Dodge Rampage was the result. It shared its platform and its drivetrain with the Omni, which meant it was front-wheel drive, which meant it was a truck that could not put power to the rear wheels, which is the one thing trucks have been doing reliably since they were invented. The bed was small, the payload capacity was limited by the car-based underpinnings, and the styling was exactly what you would expect from a hatchback that had been stretched at the rear to accommodate a cargo area. The Rampage was not a terrible vehicle for light-duty errands in good weather, but it looked like what it was, a car pretending to be a truck, and the American truck-buying public saw through it immediately. Dodge sold it for 3 model years and then quietly let it go. It is the kind of truck that is interesting to read about and considerably less interesting to own. Number 5, the Mitsubishi Raider. In 2006, Mitsubishi needed a pickup truck to compete in the American market. Rather than engineer one from scratch, they made a deal with Chrysler and rebadged a Dodge Dakota as the Mitsubishi Raider. This approach works fine when the donor vehicle is strong enough to carry a different badge. The problem was that the Dakota was already a 13-year-old design by that point, and the Raider did nothing to disguise it. The front clip was updated with Mitsubishi grille elements that sat awkwardly against the Dakota body behind it, producing a truck that looked like two different vehicles had been sutured together at the firewall. Mitsubishi sold the Raider from 2006 to 2009, moving just over 38,000 units across the entire run. The Dodge Dakota it was based on sold more than that in a single month during its peak years. When the Chrysler and Mitsubishi partnership dissolved, the Raider went with it, and Mitsubishi has not attempted an American pickup truck since. The Raider is one of those vehicles that made more sense on paper than it ever did in a dealership showroom. Number 4, the Chevrolet SSR. Chevrolet introduced the SSR in 2003 as a retro-styled convertible pickup truck, which is a sentence that contains at least two ideas that do not belong together. The SSR was based on the Trailblazer SUV platform, which meant it drove reasonably well, but had the payload capacity of mild optimism. The bed was just over 6 feet long, but the wheel wells ate into that significantly. The retractable hardtop mechanism occupied space that might otherwise have been used for cargo. On paper, this sounds exciting. In practice, the SSR was too heavy, too slow in its initial 4-speed automatic configuration, and too expensive at over $40,000. Chevrolet updated it with a proper V8 and a 6-speed manual in later years, which made it genuinely quick. But the fundamental question of what problem the SSR was solving for buyers never found a clean answer. Chevrolet built it for 3 years. The people who bought one knew exactly what they were getting. Everyone else drove past it in their regular trucks. Number 3, the Honda Ridgeline. Honda launched the first-generation Ridgeline in 2006 with a feature list that truck traditionalists found either innovative or offensive, depending on their tolerance for change. The Ridgeline was unibody construction rather than body-on-frame, which gave it a car-like ride but limited its towing and payload compared to the F-150 and Silverado it was competing against. The styling was genuinely awkward in that first generation, particularly the sail panel behind the rear door, which was a thick C-pillar that existed to provide structural rigidity in a unibody truck and ended up dominating the side profile in a way that never looked resolved. The in-bed trunk was genuinely useful, a lockable storage compartment built into the floor of the bed. The dual-action tailgate swung both down and to the side. These were smart ideas, but the market's reaction to the overall package was mixed, and Honda redesigned it significantly for the second generation. The first-generation Ridgeline has a loyal following of owners who appreciate it for exactly what it is. As a visual object, it remains one of the more challenging trucks Detroit, or in this case Marysville, Ohio, has ever produced. Number 2, the Tesla Cybertruck. Tesla unveiled the Cybertruck in November 2019 with a design that looked like it had been drawn by someone who had heard trucks described but never actually seen one. The stainless steel body panels are flat. Not styled flat, not aerodynamically flat, just flat in the way a refrigerator is flat. The angles are so severe that the truck cannot be painted because curved body panels are what allow paint to adhere properly at scale, and the Cybertruck has none. The bed is 5.5 feet long but tapers toward the rear, which limits the usable width. A standard sheet of plywood does not fit flat without the tailgate down, and even then, it is a close call. The exoskeleton design means any dent or damage to the body is extraordinarily difficult and expensive to repair. Elon Musk threw a steel ball at the window during the reveal event, and it shattered. The Cybertruck has genuine engineering ambition behind it. The air suspension is capable, the acceleration figures are legitimately impressive, and the steer-by-wire system gives it a turning radius that larger trucks cannot match. But as a visual object, it remains one of the most polarizing vehicles ever put into production. Number 1, the Lincoln Blackwood. In 2002, Ford asked a simple question: what if a pickup truck were a luxury product? The answer was the Lincoln Blackwood, and it is the most sincerely misguided pickup truck ever sold in America. The Blackwood was based on an F-150 with a single cab and a short bed, and Ford lined that bed with polished wood and black carpet. Not the cab, the bed. The cargo area of a pickup truck, the part that exists specifically to haul things, was carpeted. The power-operated tonneau cover turned the bed into something that functioned more like a trunk than a truck bed, and it was so low to the ground that loading anything taller than a grocery bag required either dismantling the cover or rethinking your cargo. The Blackwood was rear-wheel drive only at a time when every serious luxury truck competitor offered four-wheel drive. It was only available in black. It cost $52,500. Ford built 3,356 of them across a single model year before quietly discontinuing the entire line. 3,356. There are parking lots in Texas right now that hold more F-150s than that. The Blackwood was not a bad vehicle to sit inside. The interior was beautifully finished, the ride was smooth, and the Lincoln attention to detail was evident throughout the cabin. But no amount of interior quality fixes a carpeted bed, rear-wheel drive only, in a truck that cost as much as a small house in 2002. Ford never tried anything like it again, which is the most honest review the Blackwood ever received. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe and watch the next video above.